this is Gabriel's sigil, right? And these are from the Greater Key of Solomon. The Moon, Gabriel, right? Raphael, Mercury, which is today. So today I wore this when I did my daily rituals. And I've got all seven here.
Hey, Joe, super looking forward to this, man. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't talk to a lot of people anymore about hermetics and grimoires and magic and the occult.
Okay.
So I want to hear your, like what got you into it? Why did you decide to start studying the occult and what is it to you? But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you and your channel, the Mystical Rebel.
Yes, sir. Yes. So my name is Joe. I go by Joe the Mystic. On my channels, I just go by the Mystical Rebel. What I essentially do on my channel, I sort of fight against the lies, the misinformation, and the deception that's put out by the New Age, the paranormal, and the occult conspiracy communities. And I do this by utilizing esoteric and occult wisdom, knowledge, philosophy, and in some cases, theology.
So I wanted to invite you to spend some time with me on Zoom. I'm doing these classes now where I'm helping people get into podcasting and getting a lot of great responses, a lot of great questions. People are wondering like how to do their thumbnails and how to actually create content, how to share it out with the world. And hey, now's your opportunity. So I've got a couple of options that I wanted to share with you. One of them is it's a 2-day course online via Zoom. If you needed more time and more customization and personalization about what you're doing and how you want to be the change the world needs to see and how to actually profit and make money off of doing that so you can support those you love and yourself and actually pay for what it takes to do what you love to do. Like there's a lot of stuff involved, but once you start doing it, it's kind of like riding a bike and it's very addicting. It's a great addiction for me. I love sharing information and ideas with the world. And I know many of you enjoy that as well. We've helped several people already get into the podcast realm. They're really enjoying the courses. So if you want to join me and hang out with me for a bit and learn how to do podcasts and make money doing podcasts and actually turn your passion into profit, just send me a text, 970-616-5677. And you can also send me an email, leakproject@gmail.com. So I just wanted to share that with you real quick. And let's get back to the podcast right now, shall we?
Because when I started making content about 3 years ago, I didn't want to do the generic occult content that pretty much every other occult content creator is doing, at least in the beginner space. Like people who make content for beginners all tend to have the same type of content. What is magic? Who are the fairies? Who is Lucifer? Tarot tips, 101, stuff like that. And I didn't want to do that because everyone's doing that. I wanted to be different. And I felt that no one was defending the occult from an occult perspective, at least to the world. We defend it amongst ourselves. If you go into occult communities, we talk about it amongst ourselves. But to the outside world, no one was being that liaison between the legitimate occult systems and the New Age, or the legitimate occult systems and the paranormal, or the legitimate occult systems and the occult conspiracy. So I wanted to be that bridge. And so that's what I do on my channel. And that comes from my 22 years of initiatic occult experience. I started studying when I was 13. I got super lucky when I was 14. I found a coven through a friend, and because her aunt was a high priestess in the coven, and I was introduced to them. And for the next 3 years until I left for college, I was trained by them. I was brought in, and when I was 17, a few months before leaving for college, I was initiated into the first degree mysteries of the Mother Goddess. So my debunks and my corrections and all that are based on, the 22 years of occult experience that I have.
Right on, man. That's a cool testimony. I can respect that.
Yeah.
And I would say this, it's interesting because occult itself means hidden. So
Sure.
being liaison, as you say, or sticking up for the occult being a hidden aspect, it kind of sounds like an oxymoron at first, but if you think about it, it's not, because
Sure.
they're hidden mysteries for a reason oftentimes. But
Mhm.
if people are coming out making up stories about what the occult is, then
Right.
it's like it would in some ways it's going to turn a lot of people away from it. But then
Mhm.
thinking, hey, you guys are having negative thoughts about what this is, and you're permeating that negativity and pushing that negativity out towards others. So I respect that. Um,
Awesome.
it's interesting though, because let's talk about that. Like when you go, I was watching some of your videos on YouTube, and
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to watch them all, but the ones I did watch,
No worries.
you were talking to basically what you refer to as a new age, um, like a new age witch, or
Well, I mean, I just call them New Agers.
okay,
So,
okay,
yeah, I don't ascribe any magical terms to them. I would just consider them New Agers. Yeah.
okay. So, like, what gave you the passion to defend your your ideas and your occult practices, like, and actually go, like, I understand
Yeah.
the fact that you know every you wanted to be different, but there's got to be something
Mhm.
a bit more to it, like something.
Yeah. Yeah, so I remember what it was like being a beginner in the occult. Not necessarily witchcraft, because I got training in that. But once I left the Coven and went to college, and I kind of lost contact with them, everything else in the occult that I learned, I had to learn on my own, with the exception of like Kimbanda and stuff like that. And so I had to learn how to properly vet an author, how to properly vet a content creator, how to properly vet a book or a course, to make sure that the information is valid and not just pulled out of someone's rear end, right? With no validation, with no history behind it, with no foundation. And if I can save other people from that wasting, and it might not be a waste because you learn a valuable skill on how to analyze things, what is known as hermeneutics, where you analyze and study books. But you don't really have to go through that if it's not necessary. And so if I can save people the time of going through the new age and going through ghost hunting and all that other stuff, to get to actual necromancy, for example, if you wanted to talk to ghosts, right, rather than buying a $200 ghost box on Etsy, you can spend $20 and get a necromancy book and study and practice that for a few months, and then you can actually talk to your deceased loved ones, or whatever, do work in the graveyard. So if I can save people from that, and not have them go through what I had to go through, all the years of trial and error and testing things out and failing, and almost to the verge of this stuff isn't real, this stuff doesn't work. It is real. It just doesn't work because people are using derivative, watered down methods that they don't actually understand themselves, and therefore can't articulate what's going on, what's happening. They can't correct any problems. And so if I can fix all that, for some people, obviously I'm not going to affect the world, but if I can, help some people overcome those hurdles and find their path into legitimate occultism, then it's all worth it.
Okay. And you said that you were basically invited or initiated into a coven.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a coven is just a group of witches, witches who follow a certain system or tradition, or even religion in some cases, like Wicca or something along those lines. And they gather together to, just fellowship with each other, to do rituals to honor any sort of sabbats or esbats or special days of power that group or that tradition might follow. And then, of course, they offer readings, they offer healings. There's I guess what you would call a seance. I wouldn't call it a seance, but I guess what most people would probably call a seance. There's festivals, and then of course there's the I guess I would call it the mysteries, right? The stuff that you would have to uh, be initiated or receive licensia to engage with and get involved in. A lot of covens offer public rituals, so anybody can come, and anybody from the public can just show up and see what it's about, and sort of get a better understanding. But then there are rituals and festivals and Sabbaths and things that are more private and only for the initiates. But yeah, it's just a group of witches that work together.
What's your definition of a witch?
Very, very simple. Someone who practices witchcraft. Witchcraft is a very specific type of practice. I'm always saying on my channel, semantics matter. So witchcraft is not sorcery. Sorcery is not voodoo. Voodoo is not ceremonial magic. Ceremonial magic isn't chaos magic, so on and so forth. All of these different streams and paths within occultism are very specific things within the occult. And witchcraft specifically, most of it is very European. So I'll just use that. It's European folk magic, right? Where they usually agree, well, let me say it this way. The ones that follow it as a religion will agree with some sort of duality. They'll agree with a goddess and a god. So there's both a mother and a father, godhead. They honor the spirits of nature, the changing of the seasons. Most of their Sabbats are built around the seasons changing or significant astrological or planetary movements. They use their own innate power to cast spells, as well as the power of natural things like stones, roots, herbs, water, fire, things like that, as well as the planets, the elements, and any sort of, whether it's a duotheistic where there's only a goddess and a god, or it's a pantheistic where they have multiple deities that they worship. They would call on them. They have their own unique ontology, eschatology, epistemology, depending on the system. But yeah, that's how I would define a witch, someone who practices witchcraft.
European folk magic.
Well, that's the origins. After, you're obviously it's spread throughout, you've got your British traditional witches, you've got your North American folk witches, or, you got your Wiccans, you got your fairy witches, you've got your stregarias. But the base of it started over in Europe for what we would consider witchcraft. Like if you were to go to Barnes and Noble and pick up some random book on witchcraft, like a legit book on witchcraft, 9 times out of 10, unless it specifically says something else, it's going to be based on European style witchcraft.
Okay. And then when you brought up witchcraft isn't the same as sorcery, what would you classify sorcery as?
Sorcery is more personal. It's more direct. Sans the gods, sans any sort of eschatology, ontology, epistemology, sans sort of any sort of cosmology, unless the sorcerer wants. Sorcery is, for the most part, your own innate power that is driving the ritual. There's not many uses of spirits. A sorcerer can use spirits. They're not forbidden from using spirits. They're free to do as they will. But for the most part, sorcerers are practical, direct. They don't really do a lot of ceremonialism. They don't really, do the long, drawn-out rituals like you find in the grimoires. It's more, maybe fire off a sigil and call it done, right? Maybe do a quick invocation and meditation, and then you're off to your astral projection. There's no long, drawn-out rituals. It's very direct, succinct, to the point, and it usually uses the magician or the sorcerer, in this case, their own power, not really any external forces.
You brought up sigils. So what do you think of those 72 lesser keys of Solomon?
It's funny you ask about that. On Tuesday nights on TikTok, myself and another occultist from the Man of Medim channel, we go live for 2 hours from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. and we read and elucidate on various grimoires. So we're not just reading them, but we're reading them, a section by section, and then we'll explain. We'll expound on what this is saying, how, what this actually means, how to go about these things. And the grimoire that we're actually on right now is the Goetia, the Lesser Key of Solomon. So I don't have any issue with it at all. I actually have right here my I guess you can call it my chthonic or my demonic table of practice here. Not sure if you can, oh crap, it's going to blur it out. Okay. So, geez, I don't know if you can make out the etchings, the wood burning. This is probably a better one. This is the one for angels that I use, angels and planetary spirits and stuff like that. But this is the one, it's on darker wood. So the wood burning is a lot darker, but you can kind of make it out. This is what I would use for demons or any sort of chthonic spirit. And that would entail the 72 spirits of the Goetia. And I have several sigils here of the spirits of the Goetia that I work with on a regular basis, right? We've got Paimon, Buer, Gremory, And then I've got Bune here. I work with Bune a lot. I don't know if you can see that with the Seal of Solomon on the back there. It's all burned up because I have to put Bune sometimes in the fire. And then Duke Salos here. So I work with spirits of the Goetia, not as often as I used to. Most of my work now is focused on the ancestors and the seven planetary governors. But yes, I do have experience with the Goetia. I will say that demons are not all evil and angels are not all good, right? A lot of people have this notion that demons are pure evil, angels are pure good. I mean, even the Goetia itself, there are demons where the description says that they are of a good nature, or at the very least of an indifferent nature. And then, of course, we know that angels can destroy and harm just as easily as a demon can heal. In the Bible, right, when God is destroying nations, or when He's destroying people, or putting curses on whatever, He's not snapping His fingers and that happens. He's sending angels. Angels are being sent out to handle these things. It was angels that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was angels that cursed the fig tree and all that good stuff. In hell, it's not demons. If we go with the Christian paradigm, it's not demons that give out the punishments. It's angels. We learn this in the Testament of Solomon, where we learn that there's an angel of death, and in some cases, depending on your interpretation, there might be 4 angels of death. But there's the angel of death, and then under him there are the 7 angels of punishment, and those are the angels that are in hell that are dishing out the punishments, according to severity or whatever. So angels are not all good, demons are not all bad, and that does include demons from the Goetia.
The 72 Lesser Keys of Solomon. When I first, back in I think I was in my late 20s, I found a copy that was from 1913. And
wow,
Aleister Crowley was one of the people on the book, one of the, not authors, but I think he helped translate it or whatever. So it was him and Gregor, I think, from 1913.
Yes, Samuel Adamo Gregor Mathers. Yes.
Yeah, and it was like $100, and I was like, wow, I'm going to get.
Oh, wow.
So, first of all, I got to say, I will never buy a used grimoire again, ever. Second of all, I got it, and I opened it up, and there was like this watermark on the first page that reminded me kind of like a horned demon. And
wow, okay.
I don't know if what the deal was with that. But for whatever reason, I never told Kristen about it until I got rid of the book. So, and I had it for a couple of months, I think. And but so when I had it, it started changing. My thoughts started changing. I started I don't know, man. It was not good. Let's just put it that way. And the house that we were living in at the time, I think, was already haunted. Like it already had some bad mojo there. And so the point of the story is, so I had it for a while. The day I got rid of it, I gave it away. I just gave it away. And the day that I got rid of it, Kristen came home and she goes, wow, it just feels different around here. Does it feel lighter around here to you? And I'm like,
wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
And I, so I told her about that, what the book that I gave away. But it's interesting because I did, and I don't want to say too much on here but I did make a sigil, and it was for money. And I'll just say it. So I made a sigil for money, and then the next day, and I just wrote it on a piece of paper. And the very next day, speaking of sorcery, right? The very next day at my work, my boss is like, Rex, get on up here, man. And basically, I got this bonus for the month before for making. This was when I was in the timeshare business, and we got a bonus for all these sales that I made the month before that were my own personal referrals that I brought in. But that program, I didn't know anything about that program until the next day, and the way that it happened, it really spooked me, dude. I like it.
Wow, man. Look at you. Sorcerer Rex, Sorcerer Supreme. That's awesome, man.
Well, I don't know if I go that far. But anyway, I got rid of it. I gave it away. And so I don't know. Maybe certain people will do specific things with grimoires when they get them.
Mm-hmm.
Could have a negative energy or a negative attachment versus a positive one.
Definitely.
But I've got 2 theories about the sigils, and I want to get your theory on this because you brought up the demonic and the angelic. And
Hmm.
I agree with you. If you read the Bible, at least what's available to us, the angels are the typically much more powerful, and you better
Yeah,
go on an
yeah,
angel's good
they're
side.
not something to mess with.
Ooh, no. But regardless, I've heard that the sigils themselves, the 72 keys, could be representations of ourself, like aspects of ourself, archetypes of ourself.
Hmm.
I've heard the separate theory.
Right.
So, what's your theory or what's your idea? And then,
Sure.
what is a demon?
Sure. So when it comes to the models of magic, I'm definitely on the spirit model. I'm not really a fan of the psych model. That's the model that it's all in your head. Spirits are just parts of your psyche, and they just unlock parts of your brain. That's the like psych model, the Jungian psych model. I like that model for skeptics. If you're someone who can't get behind magic and you can't get behind spirits being an actual thing, starting out in the psych model can help move into the spirit model. But I'm definitely spirit model. I definitely believe that the spirits are separate from us. If humanity were to, you know, end today because of a nuclear war, the spirits would still exist, at least for a time. Eventually, they'd get weaker and weaker because there's no one here to quote unquote feed them. But they would still exist. And I think anyone, once you start working with whether it's the grimoires or whether it's the ancestors, whether it's, you know, the genius Loki, the dead, the elementals, the planetary spirits, whatever, once you start working with the spirits, I think most people would move from the psych model to the spirit model. Once you've had actual interactions with them, I think people will start to say, okay, there's something going on here that is outside of myself. But I do like the psych model for people who are skeptical, and that's a good way to bring yourself into magic. That it's all just psychology and all that, and then once you start doing it, there's no way that you're going to remain psych. I mean, Crowley himself even changed. He started out psych model, but as he started to work with some of the spirits, because he was a liar a lot of the time. But there is evidence he did work with some spirits. As he started to work with some of these spirits, he changed, and he went vehemently over to the spirit model side. So that's my perspective on the models. As for what is a demon, in colloquial terms, I use demons in the Christian way because that's what most people, at least here in the West, know demons as. However, demons I would classify in a general occult sense as just any sort of negative spirit that isn't human or that isn't a land spirit or something along those lines. Any sort of chthonic negative spirit, I guess I would consider a demon. It doesn't necessarily have to be Abrahamic, so Christian, Jewish, Muslim. It could be a indigenous, spirit from Australia, but it's evil. And I would consider that to be a demon.
Okay, so evil.
Mm.
You work with things that you think are evil? That's scary, man.
No, I don't work with things that I think are evil. I'm just saying that not so the demon term I would apply to anything that would be considered evil. However, colloquially, we use demon for here in the West, we use demon for anything that isn't like really an angel. Like if you're not familiar with other types of spirits, all you know is ghosts, angels, demons, then that's what you're going to ascribe to anything that's not a ghost or an angel is a demon.
So,
So
real quick, like the Lesser
yeah,
Keys of Solomon as an example. Some of the
sure.
sigils, some of the symbols, some of the entities, they're they're not like you talk to us about that. So they're not technically a demon. There's something else like,
Okay.
and you're
So
dropping
if
some pretty big
if
words. I got to be honest. I have to look up some of these words you're saying. I just had to look up
no, it's fine.
Sonic inhabiting the underworld, concerning belonging to the underworld.
Well, I mean, so that's the Greek term. In the greater occult, chthonic is basically any like earth-based type spirit that's not the dead, that's not a land-based spirit, can be considered chthonic. Anything under the heavens would be considered chthonic. But yes, traditionally it would be underworld spirits. But okay, so if we're going to go with the Goetia as is, right, from the Christian perspective, every being in there would be the most diabolical evil being under the sun. but reality isn't Christianity, unfortunately. In reality, if we look at the history of the vast majority of those spirits, we find that those spirits don't originate in underworld. Most of them originate either on earth or in the heavens. They come from the zodiacal class. They're either spirits of the zodiac or they're spirits that are earthbound, such as the elementals. For example, these beings are not listed in the Goetia, but they are listed in my favorite grimoire, the Black Dragon. So the Black Dragon has 4 demonic kings that would go around. Actually, I wish you could see this because they're listed around here. But they are Orions, Ejim, Amaymon, and Paymon, right? And from the modern day perspective, those would be considered demons. I mean, that's what the grimoire calls them, the 4 demonic kings. But if we look into history, and we look at the Chaldeans, we look at the Greeks, we find that these beings were actually elementals. They were the elemental kings. So the Nixa, the Gob, the Jinn, and the Peralda, those are the names that we know for the kings of the elements today. But those names are Latinized. Their original names were most likely Ejim, Orions, or Magoa, Paymon, and Amaymon.
Is that like earth, air, fire, water?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, I like to. So okay, I'm a classical hermeticist by religion, and the hermeticists would use Greek intellectual philosophy in order to explain religion, spirituality, things like that, which means they would use logic and reason. It wasn't all based off of feeling and emotion and assumption and just guesses. It was there's a logical reason that God exists. There's a logical reason that spirits exist and all that good stuff. And they would try to put that together. And being a classical hermeticist, I try to do that throughout all my spirituality. And so I am big on historicity and having a foundation for the practices that I do. And so I like to look into the history of them. And Jake Stratton Kent has a great book, or several great books actually, on the history, like the real history of the Goetia and what those spirits were prior to being demonized by the church. Because a lot of people, what you'll hear when you do the research into the Goetia, you'll hear a lot of people, usually they're Satanists, usually they're Luciferian, usually they're demonolators. They say things like the demons of the Goetia used to be gods. They were gods. That's not true. Some of them, maybe like 2 or 3 of them may have been gods, sure. But the vast majority of them were zodiacal spirits or some sort of earth-based spirit that, the church couldn't have in their sort of cosmological schema. So they had to demonize them.
Real quick, that reminds me of Albert Pike wrote a book called Morals and Dogma.
Yes.
And a lot of people have a really different interpretations of Albert Pike, but if you research
Sure.
first of all, I don't think he was racist. I think it was quite the opposite because the natives loved him and like they revered him very much because he helped them substantially.
Yep.
But I don't know, and you know what I mean. So, but I think he spoke over a dozen languages, and he referred to Lucifer oftentimes in his writings. But what's most interesting is I'm not a Freemason either, but
Sure.
I think that some of their teachings are quite fascinating and remarkable.
Indeed.
Looking at it from an outside perspective, but they describe, and I think he described, or maybe it was somebody in the Freemason order, how many demons now were not demons in the past. They were demonized, right. And that whole archetype was created. And if you've probably read the book of demonology that King James wrote before the official book came out, and he seems to be really against women, and and people that were into astrology, like he recognized that he basically said astrology and astronomy and made that a part of witchcraft and made witchcraft demonic and create. And then they even added the word Lucifer, in the King James Bible. So that was added later. Like that was, but I think Lucifer, if anything, might be a title, but I also get like this feminine vibe connected with Isis and a
Mhm.
non-divine feminine for some reason. And since you know probably more about this than I do, at least in reference to, you said you were a part of a coven called the Divine Feminine or something, the Divine Mother.
Oh, no, no. So the coven was called the Elderwood Coven. The mysteries that I was initiated into was the mysteries of the Mother Goddess. That's just what they called the mystery. So, like how there's the Greek mysteries or the Mithraic mysteries, in witchcraft, there are different mysteries depending on what coven or group or whatever you're in. And the group that I was in was dedicated to the goddess Caradwyn and the god Cernunnos, the Celtic deities. And so I was brought into the mysteries of the Mother Goddess Caradwyn, at least the first degree mysteries. There's 3 degrees, and I was brought into the first degree. So
Interesting. Celtic. Fascinating.
yeah, they were a neo-Wiccan coven that used Celtic motifs and myth and lore and stuff like that in their cosmological schema.
What's your thoughts on Lucifer? Title, being, both?
I do think Lucifer is both a title and a being. We see that all throughout demonology, or at least angelology, right? Most of the angel names are not actual names, they're titles. Michael or Michael or Raphael, these are titles, strength of God, mercy of God, will of God, judgment of God. These aren't names. And then we also see that in regular people's names. There are people out there named Michael or Joseph, and these names have a meaning. But no one, is going to call you by your meaning. They call you by your name. So I do think Lucifer is a title, the light bearer, or the morning star. But I also do believe that he is a being, even if it's just an egregore, right? We know from the Romans, he would have been identified with Venus, right?
Venus, the morning star. Venus is connected with Isis, and Venus is
yes,
connected with Inanna.
right.
So that's why
Yes.
I got the thought of Lucifer, and then the way that it was added in in the Bible, in the King James Bible, it just seemed like it was referencing Venus itself, and then usually there's an archetype or a being connected with that planetary body or that that
Exactly. And they also the Bible also calls Jesus the bright and morning star, right? He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. So, if Lucifer is this evil character that turned, humanity away from God, why is Jesus also identified by the same title? Very, very, very interesting.
Who translated that? Who authorized the translation of that? Is really what it comes
to. Exactly.
Like, did God come down? It's like, okay, I've got a pen. Here I am. I'm writing this down. They're like, no, it was divinely inspired. And maybe it was. Maybe it was. But
right.
It was still the hand of a man, most likely not. Like, what's up with why is there so much fear in the mindset and the archetype of these ancient European rulers like King James? Like, what?
Right, yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like that's what the church did back then. They instilled fear in people. I don't mean to get conspiratorial, but the problem, reaction, solution, right? They introduce the problem, and then everybody reacts, and then the people who introduce the problem, the church says, "Hey, no problem. We have the solution. Just come, give us 10% of your money, and we will, and do those indulgences, right? Just pay us, and then we'll forgive you of your sins, and everything is okay."
Most of the belief systems out there connected to war, like, oh, you go to war, you fight for your country, you die of honor, and then you go to this amazing place afterwards. It just,
yeah.
All religions almost, that there's that connection there. But
yeah, the Norse, the Norse have Valhalla. If you die in battle, you go to Valhalla, baby. So it is an ancient thing, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of that is like a control, sort of a fear mechanism. I don't know.
I want to hear more about some of your ritualistic magic. Like, because
sure.
What are you interested in? Those sigils at?
I actually got them on Etsy. I have more here. These are my angelic ones. The ones that I use for angels. I'm not going to show this one. This one has a male body part that we're not allowed to probably show on YouTube. But this is Gabriel's sigil, right? And these are from the Greater Key of Solomon. The moon, Gabriel, right? Raphael, Mercury, which is today. So today I wore this when I did my daily rituals. And I've got all seven here. But yeah, these were brought on Etsy. There's an artist in Spain. Unfortunately, though, he shut down his store back on September 3rd. He sent out an email saying he was shutting it down or whatever. So there's a sale going on, but that was back in September. But yeah, he lived out in Spain, and he makes, he's a magician, and he makes, because I'm not an artist. If I were to show you my hand painted Solomonic circle that I did like 12, 13 years ago, it's gross. It's disgusting. I'm not an artist. I can't draw straight lines. So all of my tools are professionally made by an actual occultist from somewhere either in this country or around the world, because I am not an artist. I'm not good at making tools.
It's the thought that counts. It reminds me of, so I read Crowley's magnum opus 4, that book 4, and I'll tell you what, when I read it, I wasn't really ready for it, I think, because it was one of the first books of Magick that I read. And he's so cerebral and so cryptic on things that it was difficult to understand a lot. But I do remember he described, like, if you're going to make symbols, if you're going to make magic, tools for magic, the most powerful ones are the ones that you create yourself. Like, you go out and you dig, you mine that ore for that metal and like do everything yourself. And in reality, that would be extremely difficult to do. And like you said, you're not an artist, and you can go out and you can buy these really powerful symbols and metals that the artist actually created probably under a certain time of the alignments and such to make them proper. But so what do you think of Crowley? When I have a different interpretation on "do what thou wilt" is the whole of the law.
Sure.
But what's your mindset on that?
On the "do what thou wilt." So I'm just going to be honest. I'm not a fan of Crowley at all. And if I'm being super honest, most people in the occult are not fans of Crowley. Unless you're in a Thelemic circle, where obviously that's the religion that he founded, or you're in like an OTO sort of a circle, they might have more reverence for Crowley. But I have a book over there from Georgina van Ralke, who is the high priestess of the Temple of Babylon. They are a Thelemic temple. And she wrote a book called Approaching Babylon, where she states right in the introduction that she's writing this book to move away from Crowley's version of Babylon and put a more feminist touch. So even in his own ranks, he's not really, well liked. But I don't have a high opinion of Crowley or really anything that he put out. I respect it. I respect that he created Thelema, made grimoires super popular. If it wasn't for Crowley, I probably wouldn't have all these grimoires. He popularized things like the Lesser Banishing Ritual, Star Ruby, Star Sapphire. That's great. But the conspiracy community puts Crowley on this pedestal, and they think that, everybody in the occult, every witch, every sorcerer, whatever, we all worship Crowley like a saint. And most of us could care less for Crowley. Again, we respect his contributions to modern day occultism. But if Crowley existed today in like our modern day social media age, I don't know if you know who this is, but he'd be like a Kanye West. He would be famous for some of the things he did in the past, but he'd be famous now for the things that he's saying, just his weird antics, the things he's saying in the media to just remain relevant. Because Crowley was known to say a lot of weird stuff, like, I'm the great beast 666, just to get himself out there, just to get his name out there. He was a fame chaser, or what we say today, a clout chaser. I don't really have a lot of high thoughts of Crowley. But my thoughts on "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." I sort of interpret it as finding out what your true will is. It doesn't mean do whatever you want and just, live this hedonistic lifestyle. It's finding out, and coming into alignment with what your true will is. And then once you find out what your true will is, do everything in your power to make that happen, to make that come into past or come to be or however. But I'm not a Thelemite, so that could be way off. But yeah, that's my interpretation of Crowley's "do what thou wilt."
Right on, man. Yeah. So "do what thou wilt," I think, was around way before Crowley. It was just something that he kind of adopted with Thelema, and I'm not Thelema either. And
Sure.
I haven't read much outside of the four, that book four.
Okay.
But what I do find frightening is the book of the law that he allegedly channeled.
Yep.
It starts off all nice, and then at like the last part of it, it's freaking scary, man. I'm like, oh, that's a war god that he's tapping into right there. That thing wants, destruction of everything. And so, but I love that mindset of do what thou will is the whole of the law. If your mindset is find your will and do it. And that's
right
from doing whatever you want, because
exactly.
Like you got to work hard on doing what your purpose is, especially depending on what you were put here to do. But if you find it, it's like Zen almost. You're flowing, you're moving, you're grooving.
Amen, brother.
Right on, man. Right on. So that's, I appreciate that. Tell me more, man. Tell me more.
Yeah. What do you like to know? I don't know where to begin with my practice.
Where should we start? You have some podcasts on Jimi Hendrix and some musicians. Like, and the occult, what were you connecting there? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do on my channel is I debunk and I correct a lot of misinformation that's out there. And one of the major misinformation centers, I don't know the right word for this, but one of the major groups putting out misinformation on YouTube and TikTok and all this are conspiracy theorists. And a big thing in the conspiracy community is the Illuminati and celebrities selling their soul to the devil, and all the most powerful people in the world worship Satan. And that's how they're so rich and powerful, not because they are smart in business and they make backdoor deals and they know the right people, but because they go into the woods at night and draw a circle on the ground in baby's blood and summon the devil. And that's how they get rich and famous. And I debunk all that stuff. As someone who is a witch, as someone who has diabolical, demonic books over there that have some pretty diabolical stuff, none of it tells you to go and harm a person. None of it tells you to go and steal babies and dig up graves and do weird stuff. Sure, there's curses and hexes and stuff in there, but none of it tells you to go out and take someone's life or go dig up a grave and, take the thigh bone and, go sleep among the dead. That's Hollywood. That's Hollywood tropes. Real magic, if I'm being honest, real magic is boring, dry. I guess you can make it fun, with all the colors and, ritual dancing and drumming and all that. But for the most part, it's boring. Hollywood's job is to entertain. They're not there to educate you. They're there to entertain you. So when talking about magic, if you put a camera on me to watch me do a ritual, you're not going to see what you see when you watch Doctor Strange. When I'm tracing out the pentagrams in the air, you're not going to see fiery sparks following my fingers making the symbols like you do on TV, right?
Come on, man. That's my favorite.
So I mean, these conspiratorial tropes that people have against us, right? And that's what I meant when I said, like, I'm trying to defend the occult. No one else is doing this. We do this amongst ourselves, but that's preaching to the choir. If you're another occultist, you obviously know that all those conspiracy, things about the Illuminati is ridiculous. But the people who believe them don't know. So we should be talking to them, not to each other. We know. So we should talk to the people who don't know. And that's what that video was doing. I was trying to show people that as an occultist, I can assure you that you're not going to be able to find a book that tells you by occultist for occultist that says that if you want to get famous, you gotta, sacrifice your mom, or your best friend has to be given up to us, or you have to do some unscrupulous. I don't know what I'm allowed to say, here, but
this is the uncensored hour. So say whatever you say right here. Yeah.
Okay.
Right on. Thanks, Joe. You're awesome, man. Really appreciate your time and effort. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with the world and attempting to debunk the new age fluff. And wow, man, you seem very well versed. Ladies and gentlemen, check out the Mystical Rebel on YouTube, on TikTok, on the World Wide Web. Also, if you want to listen to this podcast in full, and I know you do, check us out over on Patreon. Become an exclusive Patreon that helps support Leak Project, and you're going to get hundreds of hours of exclusive content only available on our Patreon page. We also have thousands of hours of exclusive content on our website, leakproject.com. Long format interviews, guests, and information you're not going to get anywhere else. So have a beautiful day. And yeah, check out this Aurora Borealis. I don't know if you've seen it over your house, but the sun has been intense. Solar maximum. Be excellent to each other, everybody. Be well. Hit the bell and be the change you want to see.